All right, good afternoon, good evening to some of you. I just want to jump in as usual and test the sound, make sure the sound is doing okay for everybody. So if you guys can just give me a thumbs up here.
Yeah, I can carve it out, yeah.
All right, thanks, Nadine. All right, perfect. I know at least some of us are still coming in with refreshes. It's perfect. All right, awesome. If you guys haven't done so in some of the previous sessions, or if this is your first session, please feel free to answer the poll questions down at the bottom. We are going to get started here about 5 minutes later. We're going to wait for some more people to join. We are waiting on some people, so we're just give them about another 5 minutes or so, and then we'll get started. If you guys have any questions or problems with the connection or need to refresh, please feel free to put that into the chat and we will get you guys squared away. So just hang tight. I'm gonna give it about, we'll probably get started here about 3:05, so just hang tight really quickly. And for those who are just joining, please feel free to answer the poll questions if you guys haven't done so in some of the previous sessions. So, and how are you guys liking everything so far? How's it going so far? How are you guys feeling? Feel free to put that into the chat too as well. Love to hear you guys' feedback.
Great, and Mine has joined as well. So if you're able to add Mine as a presenter, we can go ahead and get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Thank you guys. I'm loving that you guys are loving the information that's being given.
And can you confirm that Mine has been added as presenter?
I'm not seeing her in here still.
Yeah, she's okay.
Okay. Maybe do another double check around and see her in here. Hey, Matt, do you happen to know what she's logged in under? Is she just logged in under her name, or?
It should be under Mine Tok at Microsoft.com.
It's just M-I-N-E. That's let's see if I can add her and then.
Okay, we're gonna see if we can go ahead and get it. We're not live on our end, so might still be having a connection. Okay, the sound still playing for some of you. Hey everybody, is it sound still bad or is it a little bit better now? I just want to see. Okay. Okay, perfect. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Thank you all. This is Matthew from Microsoft. I believe we will be getting started shortly. Can the team from the Pragmatic Works, can you confirm that Mine is online and available to co-present as well?
Okay, we're just waiting for her to accept the invite on here, and then she should be good to go. And Matt, if you have any other tabs open, can you close them for me, Pete, please? Because I have some people.
Sure.
Sounds a little funny.
And just to confirm, Mine is on the call. So her name is Mine space Tokus, and I do see her.
I got her. I got her. Thank you.
Okay, great. And has she accepted presenter status?
I just sent her the invite right now. So she should have it in a few seconds.
So just to confirm, Mine just needs to click accept on her phone. Is that right? On the within the crowdcast.io website. Is that right?
All right, you guys just be patient with me. Right here. Okay, just bear with us, guys. We're gonna get started here in a few minutes. Just having some little connection issues, so just bear with us.
Great, and I think we can go ahead and I can go get started with my section. I'm the first part of the section, so I'm happy to start presenting, and then Mine.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. Do your thing, absolutely.
Okay, great. So yeah, thank you so much to everyone for joining today's session. So my name is Matthew Burrows. I do product marketing for SQL Server on Azure virtual machines. And really the focus here today is new innovations that we have in SQL Server on Azure virtual machines. But before we talk about that, even to take kind of a step backward, want to talk about what are SQL Server and Azure virtual machines. So as kind of an overview, there's so many customers who are using older versions of SQL Server on premises today. There's SQL Server 2008 and SQL Server 2005 are actually two of the most common versions of SQL Server. So when you think about data and technology, 10 years is a lifetime. So there's really a tremendous opportunity for many of you to modernize. Now the question is, you've got an old database, and the question for yourself is, what are you going to modernize to? And there's three options. One on the far right here is modernizing to a newer version of SQL Server on premises. And so what that means is, say you've got SQL Server 2008 or 2005 or 2012. What you can do here is continue to run on premises. You may have industry reasons or data sovereignty reasons why you need to continue to run on premises. In that case, you can continue to use the same hardware or modernize to newer hardware and then run, say, SQL Server 2016 or SQL Server 2017 or 2019, which is currently in public preview and available to purchase in a couple months. And that's the first option. The other option, kind of the other end of the spectrum, is Azure SQL Database. So that's on the far left of the screen here. And what this is a fully managed database. So there's no versions. There's no SQL Server 2016, SQL Server 2019. What Azure SQL Database is it's fully managed. So there's no updates. There's no patching required. You've got intelligence built into the database. Pretty powerful. And this is where a lot of companies, especially those who are born in the cloud, are going. But increasingly, customers are modernizing from on-premises say, to our managed instance flavor of Azure SQL Database for compatible on-premises to cloud migrations. Now, the middle here, SQL Server in a VM, that's the focus that Mina and I will talk about today. And what SQL Server in a VM is this is essentially that same SQL Server that you have running on premises in your server or your computer, say SQL Server 2016 running on Windows Server 2016. You can do the same thing in a virtual machine in Azure. And this is really kind of a hybrid of those on-premises and platform as a service offerings. Common scenarios where we see customers running SQL Server in an Azure VM are if they require full control over the operating system or the database. Another example is some of our BI workloads like SQL Server reporting services or SQL Server analysis services. If you want that to run that fully in the cloud the same way you do on premises, you'll need to run in Azure in a VM. Our PaaS offering doesn't have that. Other reasons we see customers run SQL Server in a VM are ISV compatibility. So that's another reason. And quite frankly, SQL Server in a VM is often a stepping stone. So say you've got SQL Server 2008 on premises. You can move that to an Azure VM. We actually have an offer for 3 years of free extended security updates, free extended support for 3 years if you move that SQL 08 or R2 to Azure VMs. And then once you're ready, you can move it to a platform as a service. So those are really those pathways for modernization. If you have questions, definitely put those in the chat window. I'll just kind of go steamroll through my few slides here, and then I'll be checking the chat window in a little bit. So any questions that you have are welcome. We also have a link to a docs page I can put in the chat window as well that talks about this. So the next slide here is SQL Server on Azure virtual machines. So, if I'm a customer, why should I run on Azure as opposed to AWS? Amazon Web Services with their EC2. You can also run SQL Server on Amazon Web Services EC2. And I guess as a customer, my question is why Azure or why AWS? We really feel strongly that Azure is the best place for your SQL Server and Windows Server workloads. One, best TCO. So you pay up to 5 times less than with AWS. The reason for this is twofold. One is Azure Hybrid Benefit for Windows Server and Azure Hybrid Benefit for SQL Server. You can take your SQL and Windows Server on-premises licenses if they have software assurance and move those to the cloud, so you don't have to pay again for the database or the operating system. The other cost reason is the far right side of the screen here, 3 years of extended support. And what this is SQL Server 2008 R2. If you move to Azure VMs, we're going to continue to give you free extended security updates for 3 years. If you stay on premises and you want extended security updates, it's very costly. So this is we're seeing a lot of traction here. The second pillar here is high performance virtual machines. This is something, in terms of performance, we have scenarios like SQL Server on our new Ultra Disk technology, and a number of scenarios where SQL Server, frankly, runs best on Azure. And then finally, built-in security and manageability. And I think manageability, that's something that Mina is going to deep dive in her session a little bit with this resource provider. But say our pre-configured images or self-installs registered with a resource provider, you get things like auto-patching, auto-backup, high availability that are exclusive to Azure. So those are really 4 key reasons to choose Azure when you move SQL Server to Azure virtual machines. One last thing I'd like to talk about is Linux. So in SQL Server 2016 and before, the only operating systems that we supported for SQL Server were Windows. And with SQL Server 2017, we made this available on Linux for the first time. The reason we did this is a growing percentage and very growing at a fast rate of the operating system market for databases is Linux. So with SQL Server 2017, we brought all of SQL Server to Linux, particularly the Red Hat and SUSE distributions, which are very popular with enterprises, as well as the Ubuntu distribution, which is popular with developers. So those, that's that new innovation in SQL Server 2017. In SQL Server 2019, a lot of our innovation, we've got some great blog posts and a website about this, including big data clusters, data virtualization is really focused on the Linux operating system. So I'd really encourage all of you to go ahead and get started using SQL Server 2017 or even our SQL 2019 preview bits on Linux and Azure virtual machines today. It's really easy to get started. Feel free to just type out a few of these aka.ms links on your computer to get started today to just get your feet wet in SQL Server on Linux if you haven't already. A couple of these calls to action I'll call out here. One, we have SQL on RHEL Azure VM images. So the top right of the screen here, you can see a SQL 17 on RHEL 7.4 image. We have some newer RHEL versions coming very soon, but that's just a pre-configured SQL on RHEL image for you to get started with. We have an operations guide for SQL Server specifically on the RHEL operating system. And what this is a 70-page operations guide that walks you through all the nuances of setting up, high availability, et cetera. Third, documentation. We have RHEL documentation for the steps for getting started with SQL on RHEL images. And then we have a SQL plus Red Hat page that talks about things like our joint support model. And then finally, to wrap things up from my perspective before handing over to Mine, is SQL Server on SLED. So SUSE is also a very popular and growing very fast distribution of Linux. So we have pre-configured SQL on SUSE images, we have documentation, and we have a SUSE plus SQL Server web page. So that's really it from a Linux perspective. I really would encourage you, if you're not using Linux today, SQL on Linux, to go ahead and get started. Try out some of these images in our Azure Marketplace. So that does it for my section. Yes, I'll go ahead and take a look at the chat window to see how I can help, but really appreciate all of your time today. And I think with that, we'll go ahead and, if we're able to get the audio visual working, Mine will be joining.
Mine is in here, so we're just waiting on her to show us her screen and everything.
Can someone hear me?
Hi, Mine, we can hear you and see you. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yep. So if you just want to, it looks like you're preparing to share your screen here. It's loading for us.
Please let me know when you see my screen.
Yep, we can see you.
Okay, great.
Awesome.
Sorry about the delay. Please let me know if you can still hear me. So can you please double confirm if you can still hear me? Okay.
Mine, I can still hear you. It looks like people are giving you a thumbs up in the chat. They can still hear you as well.
Okay, let's get started then. Thanks. I will talk about SQL VM Management Service, also known as SQL VM Resource Provider, and also common scenarios where SQL VM service is helpful for our customers. When you deploy SQL virtual machine, you have two options. You can either use Azure Marketplace SQL Server images, or you can bring your custom VHD, or you can install SQL Server from your own installation media on any Azure virtual machine. If you start with Azure Marketplace SQL Server images, there are a couple benefits that you will not get if you do custom installation. First of all, licensing for Azure Marketplace images is flexible. You can choose pay-as-you-go licensing, or you can use your existing licenses and leverage Azure Hybrid benefits. So you get access to free SQL Server manageability services, like you can simplify SQL Server administration. And the images are provided by Microsoft, and they are all certified and patched images, so up-to-date images. And the provisioning time is much faster compared to installing SQL Server. So you can provision a SQL Server, full SQL Server installation in around 5 minutes. If you choose to self-install or bring your custom VHD, this means you are leveraging Azure Hybrid benefits. So you should have enough vCore of licenses and active software assurance to be eligible for that. And you only get virtual machine services. So you do not get any benefit for SQL Server manageability or SQL Server administration. So to bring the management services we already had for SQL workloads running on Azure, we created the SQL VM Management Service, which is also called a SQL VM Resource Provider. So whatever deployment type you choose, you can opt into this service and get access to the full scope of SQL Server administration services. So SQL VM Resource Provider, basically, when you register, it creates a new resource for associated with the virtual machine resources. And the new resource represents the SQL instance running on the VM. And it offers operations and services for the SQL instance. So it starts with licensing updates, edition updates to update the billing associated with the Azure subscription. And it also includes automated patching for SQL Server, security updates, automated backup service, automated high availability configuration with always on availability groups, and it enables enhanced monitoring through Azure Portal. So it enables you a totally new view of SQL virtual machine, which has SQL specific information and management services from a centralized unified dashboard together with all Azure SQL offers. So registering with SQL VM Resource Provider doesn't come up with any fees. So all of the benefits mentioned here are free. And registering with SQL VM RP is supported for all SQL versions and all type of installations. So it doesn't matter how you install SQL Server. You can just create a metadata resource with the registration process and get access to the new features and the new infrastructure. And as I said, so it's a totally free service, so it doesn't give you any different charges or any different compliance or licensing requirements. So it's a free service. And when registering actually has no availability impact on SQL or virtual machine resources. The default registration method is lightweight registration. So when you run this Azure CLI command, exit SQL VM create, and pass your existing virtual machine name, resource group, and location, it will create a new resource of type Microsoft SQL virtual machine. And in the default mode, we will push the SQL EOS extension in the lightweight mode to the VM and verify SQL Server version and edition on the VM, and the extension will shut down itself. So no services will be left running, no footprint will be left, and the only data to be collected from the VM is SQL Server version and edition, that's it. So with that lightweight version of registration, you get access to the full portal monitoring and management capabilities, and you get access to the flexible licensing. So anytime you can convert this VM from a pay-as-you-go to a hub. So there is benefits of those licensing types according to your workloads, seasonality. So you can flexibly change and update the licensing type to optimize your costs. And you can, of course, use this to to manage your licenses in a simple way, because on the portal you can filter all SQL VM resources licensed in a hub type. So this means you need to be having licenses for all of them. So it's a simpler way of discovery for license management. And to get access to SQL Server administration features and the full set of the benefits, you need to install, or you need to register in the full version, full version mode. So you can always upgrade from the lightweight version to full version through portal or through a REST API call, or you can register in the full mode directly. To register in the full mode, you need to pass another parameter in the CLI command here and say SQL management mode is full. If you don't pass that parameter, it's going to register in the lightweight version, because full version requires a restart of SQL Server. So it's a one-time restart. So it doesn't restart the virtual machine. It just restarts SQL Server one time. And it installs the SQL EOS extension, which is the SQL agent, permanently on the machine. SQL EOS extension comes with 2 Windows services, one for SQL EOS query service, one for the extension service. And those services keep running on the VM to deliver automated patching, automated backup, always-on automation, and recently announced performance-optimized storage configuration features. So if you're interested in free administration services, you need to register in the full mode. Otherwise, for licensing benefits and for simplified licensing, you can register in the lightweight mode. So I'm going to demo how to register with SQL VM Resource Provider quickly. This is my Azure portal. And to find out the virtual machines, I can see the virtual machines. I can use the virtual machine service view on the portal. So this will list out all the virtual machines, including SQL Server or any other services or applications. And when you go to the virtual machine view, there is no way to filter the SQL virtual machines if you didn't use a specific naming or tagging logic. So for example, this virtual machine called Custom SQL is actually running the SQL Server because I installed it on this VM, and it's an enterprise SQL Server, and I have my licenses. But when I come here, I can only see the name of the virtual machine. It's the computer name, the operating system size, and the IP address information, and everything about the virtual machine related services, but I don't see anything about SQL Server. So at this point, I don't get any benefit related to SQL Server administration management or SQL Server specific benefit. This is simply a virtual machine. It's not differentiated from any other virtual machines. So with the SQL VM Resource Provider, it's a one-line command, and you need to pass run as the SQL VM create, name of the VM, resource group of the VM, and location. A license type is the only parameter you have to pass. Additionally, you need to tell us, do you want to license this VM with Azure Hybrid Benefit, or do you prefer to use pay-as-you-go licensing? So with this command, I will register this with SQL VM Resource Provider. And this will enable SQL Server specific administration and management services. So this is going to take only a couple minutes. And it will push the agent to the VM in the lightweight mode and verify SQL Server version and edition, and the agent will shut down. So what will happen is there is another view now that your resource will be visible to. If you go to all services and search for SQL, here now there's a SQL virtual machine service view, and this will only list the virtual machines running SQL Server. So you will only see the SQL virtual machines here in this browse experience. And it will also list the version of SQL Server and Windows Server, edition of SQL Server, and the license type of SQL Server. Is it either a hub or is it pay-as-you-go? So if a hub is disabled, this means it's a pay-as-you-go VM, and this means in the Azure bill, SQL license is also charged. So when the registration is completed, and as you see here, it's registered in the lightweight mode, then you can find that resource here in this view. And now in the overview page, You got SQL specific information like SQL Server version, edition, license type. And because this is lightweight registration, functionality is limited, but you can update SQL Server license type between pay-as-you-go and Azure Hybrid Benefit. And for the pay-as-you-go VMs, you can change the edition, and just one click here, like the property setting here, will update the billing associated with that resource. So to upgrade to full mode, you can either use portal and come here and say, I agree to restart my SQL Server and I want the full agent and I want the full SQL administration services. So for that, I will use another machine that I already registered in the full mode. So here, if you see, when you register in full mode, you get access to more features. So you can configure storage. You can see your SQL Server data log and temp.db files. And you can also enable security patching within the maintenance window for your company policy. You can enable automated backup here. This is a free service. It supports up to 30 days retention period, and you can define your manual schedule, or you can rely on an automated schedule, and you can configure Azure Key Vault for encryption, and you can set SQL Server connectivity and SQL attention credential. You can enable and disable SQL Server authentication. So this view gives you SQL Server administration and manageability services. And we are always increasing the functionality here. So soon you will get more features and more blades here. And this is another view in portal that is only enabled by SQL VM resource provider. So Azure SQL Service, let's show it from here. So there is one more view. If you search for Azure SQL on all services, Azure SQL Service View gives you the unified and centralized monitoring experience for all SQL resources running on Azure. So it includes all the virtual machines registered with SQL VM Resource Provider and SQL databases and SQL Managed Instance. So all of your SQL assets you can monitor and manage here and browse. And when you start creating, the Azure SQL experience gives you a guided create experience as well. So it gives you the deployment options as a managed instance, SQL database, or SQL virtual machines, and it shows you like which one to pick for what reasons. So we suggest starting from the Azure SQL VO and start creating the services according to your workloads requirements as it is guided here. So to continue with the common scenarios where SQL Server on Azure Virtual Machine Service is very helpful, I will cover a couple of them. Rehosting end of support SQL Server workloads on Azure is a very common scenario where customers are benefiting from SQL Virtual Machine Service. So SQL Server 2008 and 2008 R2 has ended life on July 8, 2019. So it's been a couple months. And after that, no more security patches will be delivered for those versions. And if you have on-premises workloads running production workloads on those early versions of SQL Server, now they started to carry compliance and security risks, and they are very legacy, so no more updates will be delivered for them. So you should be aware, like managing and maintaining them can associate very unexpected costs, and it may become very expensive for you. So for those workloads, there are a couple options. You can either choose to stay on premises and upgrade to a newer version of SQL Server, or you can do better than that for both for functionality and also for cost purposes. So you can modernize to Azure. In Azure, for those legacy workloads, there are two candidate services. You can either choose to go the fully managed service, which is managed instance, or you can rehost them on Azure virtual machines. So if you rehost them in Azure virtual machines, you will get 3 more years of free access to extended security updates. So if any compliance or security breach is catched during the 3 years, all the security patches will be delivered to those VMs with no extra charge. So to be eligible for the extended security updates on premises, you need to do a different agreement and contract with Microsoft, and it's not free. So it's associates a significant cost for on premises, but it is totally free on Azure. In addition to the cost and compliance and security risks, SQL Virtual Machine Service offers more value to the end of support workloads. So it's the simplest migration. You can customize, you can generalize your VM and bring your own VM, or you can recreate the VM from our 2008 R2 images. So there is an unlimited backup retention period. Backup service available. So this is through Azure Backup Service, and it supports those end of support version of SQL Server, and it offers enterprise grade backup service, SQL Server backup service with no retention period. And the high availability can be achieved with SQL Server Failover Cluster instance by using Silos Data Keeper as the shared storage solution. The other benefits are the flexible licensing. So you can convert those virtual machines to pay-as-you-go licensing. And then if these are like seasonal workloads, or you can shut down the VMs on the weekends, then you can save significant cost because you don't need to keep active software assurance. And you already get rid of the infrastructure cost, and you can really minimize the SQL Server license cost for seasonal workloads by going back to pay-as-you-go license model. For on-premises, extended security patches are only eligible through software assurance, but it is not valid for Azure. So even for pay-as-you-go licensing, you will get access to free ESU patches. And of course, with SQL VM Resource Provider, with SQL VM Management Service, if you register those VMs, the end of support, then you can automate patching of extended security updates, and you can easily change SQL Server editions and reflect billing. And the conversion between Azure Hybrid Benefit and pay-as-you-go is only possible if you register with SQL VM Management Service. So this is the view of automated patching, and this will deliver the security updates for the end of support versions in an automated way, so you don't need to worry about them at all. The second scenario to highlight is modernizing mission-critical SQL Server applications. Mission-critical applications are looking for basically performance, availability, and disaster recovery. And migrating and hosting them Azure virtual machines is offering much better performance, availability, and disaster recovery services on Azure infrastructure compared to on-premises. On the performance side, premium disks are coming with an read-only Azure Blob Cache feature. So on all of the hosts on Azure data centers, they come with high capacity and very fast SSDs attached to those local hosts. And when you provision a VM, some of the local SSD capacity has been made available to the virtual machine. And together with the premium storage disks, which are actually network disks, so it's a remote storage disk, so the local SSD capacity has been available to the VM, and all the data, all the reads are coming through these SSDs. So the summary is, with the read-only caching and premium SSD disks, majority of the disks reads the SQL Server workload needs will be stored from the local attached SSDs on the host level, and they will not bring any additional costs. So it will be included in the VM compute cost only. So for majority of the workloads, you will be only writing to the remote storage, and all the reads will be delivered from the host level cache. So this is a huge price performance advantage for SQL Server workloads, because majority of the SQL Server workloads are read heavy and not like very big size. And Azure VMs comes with very large size of local SSD capacity, like E64 has 1.6 terabyte of local SSD cache available. So like if you have 1.5 terabyte of database and it is a read-heavy activity, so with the Azure memory optimized VM sizes like E series or M series, and with the premium SSD disks read-only cache enabled, you can achieve a huge throughput, very good performance at a much lower cost than you will get it on premises. And for the latencies, for the read latencies are very high performant on premium storage. Write latencies are about 3 to 5 milliseconds, but with the write accelerator, they are bringing down to millisecond level. But if your workload needs sub-millisecond latencies, like microsecond level latencies, then UltraDisk supports that. And with UltraDisks, very highly mission critical workloads, you can combine UltraDisks and E series or DS series, like the memory optimized VM series, to come up with the performance levels your workload require. Single virtual machine on Azure offers 99.95 high availability SLA. It can be done for various reasons. It may be for planned downtimes or for storage failures or for unplanned failures. And if you can manage that by having another virtual machine on the availability side or by having another virtual machine on the next availability zone. And to get that availability into SQL Server level, you need to use SQL Server high availability or disaster recovery technologies like always on availability groups or failover cluster instance. So both of them are supported, and both of them are both SQL Server HADR technologies are supported on the VMs in the same availability set or different availability zones with both synchronous and asynchronous replication. If you choose to have 49HA SLA, you can use different availability zones with synchronous replication, and the network latency overhead is just 1 to 2 milliseconds. And for disaster recovery, you can configure it on the VM level with Azure Site Recovery. And SQL Server supports Azure Site Recovery as a DR technology with app consistent snapshots with 1 hour RPO. Or to make it better than that, you can configure always on availability groups in an asynchronous replication mode for the VMs between multiple Azure regions. So if you register your VMs with SQL VM Management Service, there is additional benefits in availability and performance areas. For availability or configuring of always on availability groups, it is much more simplified with SQL VM Management Service. Instead of doing a manual configuration through SSMS, you can use Azure CLI commands or Azure Quick Start templates to bootstrap Windows failover cluster and to create Azure Listener. Because SQL VM Management Service models Azure Listener as a metadata object, and it handles configuring Azure Listener together with the Azure Load Balancer. So it handles the setup of the Azure Load Balancer, backend pool and front-end pool, and setting up all the ports and connections required for the Azure Listener. So it's a huge simplification to provision high availability solutions for SQL Server workloads. And for performance optimization, so we just announced a new feature last week together with SQL VM Management Service. So when you create a new VM, to find the most optimum storage configuration for your workload, you can use SQL VM Management Service. So according to your workload type, it can be either OLTP, DW, or general purpose. It creates the storage configuration according to SQL Server performance best practices. Basically, it separates data and log files into different storage pools or different disks. It sets the cache configuration for read-only cache for the data files to get you leverage the host level block cache, and it disables caching for log files because caching slightly extends latencies for the log files, and we don't want that for the log files for sure. And it locates TMTB in the local storage, local SSD, and automates the reconfiguration of the TMTB files after a failover. So it's a huge simplification and manageability over the storage configuration required for the best performance. So these are the example commands SQL VM Management Service offers to configure always on availability groups. So there is SQL VM group create command, which is representing the Windows failover cluster. So you can use this command to create a Windows failover cluster, and SQL VM add group to add VMs to the Windows failover cluster. And finally, SQL VM Azure listener, you can use this easy CLI to create a listener. So with this method, you have very little reasons to use SSMS, and you can optimize and simplify most of the deployment that requires understanding of the Azure specific infrastructure details. And this is the performance optimized storage configuration that is available through SQL VM Management Service. So this offers, as I said, this automates creating a SQL VM for the best performance by setting the right storage configuration. So to give some examples of the reasons why, example category of mission critical workloads running on SQL VM. So some part of it is like seasonal applications that peaks at some seasons and then downsize, that need to downsize for the rest of the time, like tax management applications, which are running on the full capacity or the peak capacity on the tax season and then lying down and scaling down for the rest of the year, or like online ticket sales systems or like the game systems, so they need to pick and then scale down. So for such kind of workloads, pay-as-you-go licensing offering significant cost savings, and the flexibility to scale up and down the VM sizes is also a huge benefit for those workloads, because as long as you are not changing the host, you can just resize, scale up and down of the VM with a restart. Basically, you will be just enabling more vCPU and memory capacity for your workload with a simple restart. So that's a huge benefit for those workloads. And the second category of mission critical workloads we are seeing are like core banking systems, financial asset management systems, insurance systems, and public affairs. It's very common. So those workloads, we have a reference architecture for mission critical applications. We are seeing significant use of synchronous availability groups between zones in the same region and an asynchronous replication on the next region to come up with an very efficient and low RTO and RPO HADR solution for those permanent workloads. And lately, SharePoint Farms and SAP backed by SQL Server are leveraging the capacity on demand and the scale up elasticity of the SQL VM service. The next workload type to highlight is the workloads where they are requiring limitless scale. So mostly analytics workloads, or like the workloads where they are using SQL Server as a storage unit that gets input from various different platforms and that are serving to different analytics options. So for those systems, they need to scale in a limitless manner. So like they start with 100 terabyte and they may scale anywhere like 500 terabyte or more. So for those systems, because SQL Virtual Machine Service gives you the full control on the VM storage on all an operating system and all levels, it's very useful. So you don't need to be depending on any any limitation of a managed service, and you can definitely pick and choose your VM and your storage and leverage the services available. So for those very large data sizes, SQL Server supports data and log files distributed into multiple premium storage accounts. So you can use premium block storage accounts and then put SQL data and log files and distribute them into multiple storage accounts, and then you are getting nearly limitless size limit. And with that, you can use SQL Server file snapshot backup feature, where backups are not regular native SQL Server backups, where you have to read all the data from the data file and then write into the backup file. It's basically file snapshot. So you will need to be backup with file snapshot on, and when you need to restore, you will be restoring only 2 snapshots for the point in time restore you need to go back to. So it's not a size of data operation, and the restores of like terabytes of data is possible in minutes with this method. And finally, M series and MV2 series, so Skylake and Cascade Lake processor family of Intel's latest innovations are available to use for these very large-scale workloads. So MV2 series today supports up to 208 cores and 5.7 terabyte of RAM, and they can be combined with premium blob storages or premium disks. And they support host cache and they support write accelerators. So with those sizes, you can also get very, very good performance with low latency reads and writes. So this is an architecture of file snapshot backup, and it is possible only after SQL Server 2016 and above. And finally, lift and shift of legacy applications to Azure VMs is also very common and largely leveraging SQL Server and Azure Virtual Machine Services. So those legacy applications are not easy to change, and they are actually running on legacy technologies. Like there are a lot of applications, they have so many databases per instance, like 1,000 databases per instance. Most of the databases are cold and are a small size, but they have to be highly available all the time. So if you are leveraging failover cluster instance on premises and you want to keep that architecture, this is possible in Azure Virtual Machines. So with with Windows Server 2016 and above, storage spaces direct can be used to create an cluster shared volume for the Windows failover cluster, and SQL Server failover cluster instance can leverage that. So it will be internal storage level replication for all the writes, and use some capacity of the disks for the replication, but it offers good performance actually and high capacity for the FCI clusters. So there is another option which is premium file shares. So you can use premium file shares as a shared storage option for SQL Server, and this is like very much easier to maintain and very low cost solution for failover cluster instance as well. So when you set up a failover cluster instance, passive replica will not require any SQL Server licenses. So passive HA replica rights are available in the same way as on premises. You can leverage that on Azure Virtual Machines. And for such legacy workload types that do not require very high performance, but require a lot of availability, or they are like IO consuming, but they don't require so much vCPU, then you can leverage the constrained VM sizes. So for example, all the M series and E series, they come up with half and quarters constrained VM sizes. So you can keep all the IOPS and bandwidth capacity of the compute for available for your workload, but you can constrain the vCPUs up to half or a quarter, and then you can save SQL license cost in this way if your workload doesn't need that compute capacity. So this is the current Windows failover cluster architecture with storage spaces direct, and the alternative architecture is coming soon. So actually, we will be updating all the docs like this week. So to talk about and summarize the Azure's benefits for Microsoft and SQL Server workloads. So there is huge cost benefits when you think about Azure hybrid benefits, reservation, pricing, RI, and Azure cost management. So you should definitely explore the cost side of hosting your Windows Server and SQL Server workloads on Azure versus other clouds, because there are huge discounts and benefits for Windows Server and SQL Server workloads when they are rehosted or lift and shifted to Azure. The second thing they highlight is security and compliance, because Azure has more certifications than any other cloud. And specifically for SQL Server, Azure Security Center can be used to configure Azure threat protection and vulnerability assessment for SQL Server on virtual machines. So it will include both threat analysis and vulnerability assessment for virtual machine specific, virtual machine related attacks, and also it will cover SQL injection or related SQL Server attacks. And finally, hybrid storage is only possible with Azure. So compliance, cost, and hybrid storage should be three pillars you should be exploring before you decide like where to rehost or where to keep running SQL or Windows workloads. With SQL VM Management Service, additional benefits will apply for all of these workloads. So with dedicated hosts, you can save SQL Server license cost up to 50% if you choose to license the host for SQL Server, because it comes with 2-to-1 virtualization benefit. So you will be only paying for the physical cores on the host, but you will get double virtual cores. So it's if you need like large compute sizes, dedicated hosts are a huge way to save SQL Server license cost. And this licensing option will be only available through SQL VM Management Service. So free automated backup, centralized monitoring, and again, all the license conversion and cost optimization benefits are only available if you register with SQL VM Management Service. So I already did the demo, so that's all from my side. Thanks a lot for joining and listening.
All right, Mina, it looks like there's a few questions down in the question panel. I'm not sure if Matt had already gotten to those.
Okay. So I'm trying to get to the questions.
Okay. If you look down there at the very bottom where it says call to action, there's an ask a question. Looks like there's 5 questions in there, but it looks like Matt has gotten to those. Yep. It looks like Matt has answered all of those.
Okay, great.
All right, perfect. All right, you guys, so it is about 3:59. So if you guys are looking to slide into the last session of today, please go up in your left-hand corner and click the last session. Mina and Matt, we want to thank you guys so much for hosting this. We really appreciate it. And we hope that you guys are enjoying, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. Hope that you guys are enjoying your Azure Data Week. And if you guys have any questions about this session or any of the sessions, please feel free to reach out to myself or Pragmatic Works. We would love to help. And if you guys have any questions about this session in particular, please feel free to reach out to myself or Mina or Matt. Again, guys, thank you so much for hosting, and we hope to see you guys in the next session.